And to be perfectly honest, this story is one of the reasons I wanted to do this series. As somebody who worked with youth for many years, this was a favorite of kids. Once they found this story, they think it's hysterical. And I mean, let's be honest, this is a pretty gross story too. It really is. It's gross, it's weird, and when I first heard it, I had to double check it was in the Bible. Because it's pretty dark. I mean, the Bible can be pretty dark anyways, let's be honest. But this one's a pretty dark one. And one of the reasons that this is actually kind of a difficult one to preach on is because if you write a sermon, one of the things I look at is the commentaries, which is theologians, people who are much smarter than me. What do they see in the story? How do they interpret it? How do you understand the history of the situation? And there's a lot of discrepancies between commentaries on what the story really means and some of the different aspects. So before we get into it too much, I'm going to kind of recap the story a little bit. So the story starts out with Israelite people falling back into this cycle of disobedience to God. Let's be honest, if you read in the Bible, this seems a pretty common cycle for them, isn't it? They make a mistake, they beg for God's mercy, He forgives them, and then they screw up again. And that vicious cycle continues. Well, that's what's happening here. They forgot that God had raised them up, and they worshiped other gods. Well, they screw up again here, and God allowed the king of Moab, King Eglon, to become stronger and to take over the people and overcome them and to make the Israelite people their slaves. So the Israelites are the slaves of the Moabites, and they are held in captivity for about 18 years. And once again, God calls up somebody. This situation is a judge by the name of Ehud. And Ehud is from the tribe of Benjamin, and the Bible says he's left-handed. Now that's one of the reasons I kind of identify with this story is I'm left-handed. Okay? But this part about him being left-handed is one of the areas that theologians don't agree on. They understand that he's left-handed. But the reason why is, well, different things. Some consider him to be underprivileged because he was left-handed. Some say he had a deformed right hand. There are some that say he was ambidextrous, which is strength in both hands. Some also point to Judges 20:16 that talks about the 700 men from the tribe of Benjamin who are called chosen men who were left-handed and were deadly with slings. And they were amazing fighters. So there's good evidence that Ehud was maybe one of these 700 warriors. Now, regardless of why he was left-handed, we don't know. Despite all the different opinions, we know this guy is left-handed. So, continuing on with the rest of the story, the Israelites get Ehud to take a gift to King Eglon, and before Ehud goes to bring his gift to the king, he makes a dagger or a short sword about 1.5 feet long and attaches it to his right thigh under his clothes so it's concealed. And when he arrives, he presents the gift, the tribute to King Eglon from the Israelite people. Now, King Eglon is described as a very fat man. After Ehud had presented his gift to King Eglon, Ehud sent his team of people away that had helped carry the gift to the king. And when he sent his people away, he turned to the king and said, I have a message for you. Now, I'm a movie guy. And have you ever seen the gangster movies? And all I can think is Ehud kind of leaning in, saying, I got a message for you. You know, am I wrong, or did anybody else kind of get that when you're reading this? It's like a mafia movie, where he's like, I got a message for you. And the king is like, all right, don't say anything, and he sends out all of his retainers, his guards, everybody out. So it's just Ehud and Eglon there. And Ehud, again, kind of steps up to the king and says, I have a message for you from God. And the king gets up from his seat, kind of struggling, probably because it says he was a very fat man. And Ehud reaches with his left hand to his right side, pulls out a sword, and sticks it into the king. Now, the Bible says that the handle, the blade and the handle went in, and the king's fat covered the whole thing so that it could not be pulled out. Now, what's interesting is it actually depends on the translation on whether or not this story continues, because there's actually extra parts of this. In some translations, like the NIV or maybe the Message, they leave out the gross part that I'm going to share with y'all. But the Hebrew text actually indicates that when Ehud stabbed the king, that there might have been a little fecal matter come out at that time. In fact, some translations say it as dung. Some say poop. The King James tries to keep it kind of clean and calls it dirt. But in essence, he stabbed him in the intestines, and we know what the intestines carry. That came out. How gross is this? Now, does anybody not understand now why kids don't think this story is wonderful? It's a gross story. I mean, anytime you talk about any body functions or bathroom things, kids love it. Because that's what they do. And to be perfectly honest, I love teaching on it. Because it's kind of funny. I mean, it's gross. People don't realize the Bible, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here, right? So anyways, after Ehud stabs the king, he escapes through the doors and locks them. And after a while, the king's servants wonder where he is and go to the room, but they find the doors locked. Now, one of the commentators says that maybe the smell of the king's poop caused the servants to think that maybe the king was in the bathroom. So they didn't want to bother him. I mean, this is the king. You don't bother him in his most intimate of times, right? So the servants waited a long time until they got embarrassed. I'm sorry, again. They waited outside his bathroom for him to get done until they were finally like, dude, he has been in there a long time. I think we need to go get the key. We need to check on this guy because nobody's in the bathroom that long. So they get the key, they open the door, and they find the king dead. Now the story goes on to say that he had escaped while the servants were checking on the king, and when Ehud arrived back at his people, he assembled the people by blowing a trumpet, and he tells them to follow him because the Lord has given the enemies, the Moabites, into their hands. So it says they went down and seized the stronghold, and they killed 10,000 men. Now here is where another discrepancy among theologians happens. Okay? So understand, this is why the story is difficult to really talk about. So some translate that these 10,000 men were strong and well able, and some translate that they were stout. We know what stout really means, right? Another theologian says that these 10,000 men were all fat like their king, but they were strong. But anyways, the story ends with the Israelite people taking on their enemies, and Judges 3:30 says that they had peace for 80 years. What do you think of that? There's a lot going on in this story. This is not your typical Noah's Ark story that we hear, that we have little stuffed animals for and play sets for. They're not making a play set of this Bible story. Okay? That's not going to happen. just want to think about some of the implications of this story, though. I see in the story a group of people who realize that they've sinned again. The Israelite people know that they have sinned. They know they've made a mistake. And so they know that they need help. And I see a man that is ordained by God to help these people out of their predicament. And then I see a plan unfold in 4 steps to ensure that the plan is successful. Successful for the people of Israel. The same plan for success on work is available in our spiritual lives, in our daily lives. Number 1, first, to be successful, we need to ask God for help. It's pretty easy, isn't it? I mean, that's what we need to do, but how often do we fail to do that? Judges 3:15 says, "Again the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer." The people of Israel called out for help. There was memory. They knew that when it happened in the past, what did the people do? They called God for help. So they cried out to him too. They were seeking, they were desperate for help from God. So if we want help, whether it's our spiritual lives, in our work, in our financial situations, in our decisions, in our families, if we want success, we need to ask for God's help. Period. We can come to God in prayer anytime and ask him for guidance. Even just a little something as you're walking into a situation. Ask God for help. I don't know how many times I've been driving to something, an event, or maybe into a counseling session. And even though I may have prayed on it before, as I'm driving, I don't close my eyes during those prayers. But as I'm driving, I'm offering up more prayers. God, you know what? I honestly don't know for sure what I'm going to do right now. But I know I have to trust you. Give me the words to say. And also give me the nudge to shut up if I need to shut up. We ask God for guidance in our words and our actions. To be successful, we ask God for help and his leadings. And he gives us this perfect opportunity through prayer to do just that. Now, second, to be successful, we need to utilize our strength. Judges 3:21 says, Ehud reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. Now, like I mentioned before, there was a special acknowledgement that Ehud was left-handed. Regardless whether Ehud was disabled in his right hand, or is naturally left-handed, or is ambidextrous, we get the picture that Ehud had an advantage by being left-handed. For Ehud, his left-handedness was a strength for him. Maybe even the element of surprise. Because we have to remember, most people were right-handed. And if you were not right-handed, you usually trained to do more things with your right hand. So if nothing else, the element of surprise of the attack coming from the left as opposed to the right was a strength. It may seem like a small detail, but it was relevant because it does mention it very particularly in the Bible. So what are your strengths and how are you utilizing them? Just like God gave Ehud strengths, he's given each one of us strengths. What do they look like and how are you using them? Now what's interesting is so many people look to what they do in their day-to-day lives, especially their occupation, as their strength. Right? They say, well, I'm an accountant, so my strength is finances. So I need to be, say, the financial secretary or whatever, right? We have a great financial secretary who does everything. She's a nurse. You know, you can't say, well, only her strength lies in nursing. No, she does a phenomenal job. So we can't necessarily point to that. Our strengths are whatever God gives us, whatever that may be. And it may not be a traditional strength. Maybe it's just being left-handed. But our strengths are whatever God gives us, and how are we using them? Now maybe hospitality is your strength. Maybe physically you're strong. Maybe that's your strength. Maybe bookkeeping. Maybe you're a great conversationalist. My kids know I don't shut up very much. I'll talk to anybody. I'm getting a nod from my son. I will pretty much talk to anybody. I can find somebody to talk to about anything. But that's what I like to do, and that's a strength God has given me. Maybe you're creative. Maybe you're an idea person. Maybe your strength is compassion. There's so many strengths that we have, and I see them in all of you. Every one of us has a strength. And if you say, well, I don't have any, I bet you if I ask somebody about you, or I can maybe even figure it out, I guarantee you we can find a strength in you. Others, though, sometimes see the strength in us before we do. Have you ever noticed that? I know Bruce and I have actually talked about this, the fact that it seemed like others knew that we were supposed to do ministry before we did. I had no thought. Nobody grows up and is in elementary school, or very few do, and says, when I grow up, I want to be a pastor. I mean, it just doesn't happen. I'm not saying that nobody does, but let's be honest. It's usually a firefighter, a policeman, something like that. Very rarely do you hear a kid say, I want to be a pastor. And if it is, they rarely don't know what being a pastor really is. Because it's not just standing up here and making people listen to you as you talk. There's more to it than that. But whatever your strengths, the question is, are you utilizing your strengths for the glory of God's kingdom? Are you using the strengths to share the love of Jesus with those who you come in contact with? The story goes that 2 shoe salesmen were sent to Africa. One sent a telegram home that said, "Get me home. Nobody here wears shoes." The other salesman's telegram said, "Send me all the shoes you can. Nobody here wears shoes." Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Now, I don't know if this is a true story or not, but one of the salesmen saw the opportunity and took advantage of his strengths. Are we utilizing our strengths to be successful for God's kingdom? Third, to be successful, we need to have a plan. You see, in the story of Ehud had a plan. We see that from when he made that double-edged knife or a sword. We see it in how he concealed that weapon, and how he told the king he had a secret, and how he got the king separated from the servants and guards. But Ehud's plan did not stop there. He had a plan for escape that would leave enough time before his enemies found the king that was dead. Judges 3:23-26 says, "Then Ehud went out to the porch. He shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. After he had gone, the servants came and found the doors of the upper room locked. They said, 'He must be relieving himself in the inner room of the house.' They waited to the point of embarrassment, but when he did not open the doors of that room, they took a key and unlocked them. There they saw their Lord fall into the floor dead, and while they waited, Ehud got away." You see, Ehud had a plan to be successful, and he put it into action. And Ehud's plan was pretty extensive. His plan got him into the king's court. His plan got him alone with the king. His plan got the king killed, and his plan got him safely back to his people to assemble his people into an army. Do you make plans and carry them out to completion? You know, when I was working towards becoming a pastor, I had to go through behavioral interviews. In fact, I had I think it was about 600 question questionnaire that I had to answer. And basically, I always tell people it's not to find out if we're crazy, it's just to find out if we're United Methodist crazy, which is acceptable. But one of the questions said this: tell us of a time you started something and saw it through to completion. They wanted to hear the planning, the execution, and the end product. To get to the end product, we need to have a plan. We need a plan to share our faith. We need a plan to use our strengths. And we need a plan to accomplish great things for the kingdom. You see, when we go through and come up with ideas on how to share the gospel, we have to plan it all. We have to plan what we're going to do, who we're going to do it for, dates, and all that. But we also have to think about the financial aspects of it, don't we? I mean, it's important. It talks about in Scripture where a guy started a house and he didn't have enough money to complete it because he hadn't planned ahead. Well, we have to plan ahead too. So, folks, that's part of what we have to do for everything. We have to plan for every step of it, including, yes, the financial aspects of it. So that's why it's so important for us to give to the church, not for the church's sake, but for the church's mission. There was a British sculptor by the name of Sir Jacob Epstein, who was once visited in his studio by an author by the name of George Bernard Shaw. You guys ever heard of him? Some of you may have, some of you may not. If you haven't, please look into his stuff. He's a phenomenal writer. But Bernard Shaw noticed this huge block of stone kind of standing in one of the corners. And he asked the sculptor, what's this big block of stone for? And the sculptor said, well, I really don't know yet. I'm still kind of making plans. And Shaw was kind of sort of taken aback. He said, you plan ahead? I can't imagine doing that. I change my mind, several times a day when I'm writing something. And the sculptor says, well, that's all very well with a 4-ounce manuscript, but not with a 4-ton block. That makes sense, doesn't it? I think we've all known people have had great ideas, but did not take the time to make a plan. And we cannot establish these plans apart from God. Proverbs 16:3 says, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. When you're planning, turn to God in prayer and give your plans to him. That is the greatest partnership you can ever establish. I remember as I was starting to get more and more into ministry, I had the senior pastor, and I came up with this idea for a ministry. And I said, I have this great idea. I think this would be really great. It was about our 5th quarter program. But anyways, I said, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And he says, that's wonderful. How are you going to do it? I said, no. I'm giving you the idea. It's all yours. Run with it. And he said, yeah, but God gave it to you. Don't you hate those moments when somebody speaks a little too much truth to you? And you're like, oh, really? I mean, yeah, you're right, but I don't really want to hear that. I just want to be an idea person. And I'm not saying that some of you may not come up with just great ideas and then the church kind of runs with it. But very often, if God has given you an idea, something to do, then he probably wants you to kind of head it, to be a part of it, to lead it through to completion. In conclusion, I want to finish up with the 4th step to being successful. In order for us to be successful, we need to seize opportunities. In Judges 16:27-29, it says that Ehud arrived back at his men, and he blew a trumpet in the hill country, and the Israelites went down with him to the hills. And it says, follow me, he ordered, for the Lord has given Moab, your enemy, into your hands. So they followed him down, and taking possession of the fords of the Jordan that led to Moab, they allowed no one to cross over. At that time, they struck down about 10,000 Moabites, all vigorous and strong. Not a man escaped. Their king had been killed. Their leadership was gone. Ehud did not hesitate. He assembled his troops and marched against this group of men with no king. How about you? How about us? Are we seizing the opportunities that are before us? Are we seeing to opportunities that we have to share our faith? And how are we going to do it? Often we get a conversation started, even steer it towards spiritual questions, but we struggle to get it through to completion when the opportunity arises. God has called us to be a church in the community of Radnor and in this area of Carroll County. Are we seizing opportunities? We have people outside our doors who are hurting, and that's an opportunity. We have people walking by our church, driving by our church. And I don't just mean this little street here. We have 421, not too far across the field. We have those people that are hurting, that are struggling, that are needing something. Are we seizing that opportunity? My dream is that we truly become a community church for the community that God has placed us in. If every church in this area truly became a community church, we would truly rock this area for God. Are we seizing the opportunities? Are we looking to the opportunities that God has placed before us? Because He does. Sometimes we're not listening. Sometimes we kind of tune God out into like the Charlie Brown teachers. You know what I'm talking about. You ever remember watching the Charlie Brown cartoons? And when the teacher would talk, what would we hear? Sometimes we tune God out like that. It's this sound, and we kind of, maybe we turn the radio up to ignore him a little bit better. But there's opportunities out there. We are already coming up with new ideas for Christmas this year. I'm excited about it. I love it. What else can we do? We can't just sit back and say, well, just during this time of year, we're going to help, otherwise we're going to be comfortable. Nah, we're not going to do that. We're going to do something else. So what are we going to do? I'm the pastor here, but I'm not it. Good Lord, no. It would be impossible for one person to do all the opportunities that we have available to us, that God is teaching us. I wouldn't want to do it all. One, because that would be exhausting. But two, I'd hate for you all to miss out on the opportunity to be a part of it. Have you ever been so excited and so overwhelmed with energy about doing something that you do not need anything else? You can go for 24 hours and you're booking it and doing this one. Coming up in October, we have the Walk to Emmaus. And although I've never served on Walk to Emmaus, I've served on Great Banquet. And it's a very similar period of time. We go in on Thursday, we get out on Sunday. And I specifically remember one weekend, I was on a spiritual team. And I think I maybe had 3 hours of sleep that weekend. Matt asked me if I was tired. Not a bit. Now, when I went home on Sunday, I died. But during that time, I didn't do nothing. All right, granted, I drank some coffee. But God is going to put those opportunities before us. He's going to give us the energy to do what has given us all these opportunities. So what do we do with them? And are we seeking them out? Amen?